Kicks is a 1981 arcade game designed by husband and wife Randy and Sandy Pfeiffer for Taito's American division. The game is incredibly simple, involving the player moving around trying to draw lines in order to fill in as much of the play area as possible, all while avoiding hazards that can only attack them while their marker is active, particularly the titular abstract being known as the Kicks, one of the most terrifying creatures in all of video games, as it lacks any sort of conscience, never being outwardly aggressive, just going wherever it wants to go. Despite receiving plenty of clones, ports, and sequels, it's remained relatively obscure as far as Golden Age arcade games go. But I'm not here to talk about it. I'm here to talk about one of its sequels, Twin Kicks, planned to be released in arcades in 1995 for Taito's F3 system board, which was sort of like Taito's answer to SNK's Neo Geo and Capcom's CPS hardware, as it was arcade hardware powered by interchangeable cartridges, and hosted some of Taito's very best games on it. The main gimmick of Twin Kicks, as its title suggests, is that it's Kicks with two-player competitive modes. It's not very in-depth though. This isn't even the first Kicks game to include multiplayer, as the NES port of the original Kicks contained co-op. The concept of competitive multiplayer in Kicks would, however, be revisited in 2002's Battle Kicks for the PlayStation and later 2009's Kicks Plus Plus. Aside from that, the game doesn't do much to help itself stand out other than featuring you uncovering images of landmarks. However, upon hacking the files of the ROM that was released online, it was found that a completely separate version was planned for release in Japan, with you uncovering pictures of anime girls in various scenarios designed by mangaka Izumi Takemoto, and it has a goofier tone. No, it's not like one of those games. These aesthetics are cool and whatnot, but I personally prefer when Kicks is completely abstract. The weird thing about this game is that, as I've been alluding to, it was cancelled and never released. What's weird about this is that it's perfectly fine, so I don't even know why they didn't release it. It does feel a little unfinished though. The music was clearly going to be replaced for the US version, as the oddly cheery music doesn't fit its aesthetic. Regardless, if you've never played a Kicks game before, I highly recommend you check them out. You've been missing out. My favorite games to talk about are the ones that aren't very popular or kind of obscure, yet aren't really niche at all. On July 19th, 1991, Naxatsoft released the game Sei Spriion or Spirit Soldier Spriggan, developed by Compile for the PC Engine CD-ROM. This game was their attempt to replicate the success of Hudson Soft's own Caravan shoot-'em-up games that were released commercially, but were also the centerpiece of score competitions held every year in Japan. This is why Naxat hired Compile to work on their game, because they previously had experience working on Hudson's Gunhead. As such, the game was the centerpiece of Naxat's own 1991 Summer Carnival event that they had started that year. It's a pretty neat game with an interesting gimmick of you being able to combine up to 3 colorful orbs you can pick up in order to create different weapon combinations. With a gimmick this interesting, I'm kind of surprised the game doesn't get the same amount of attention as, say, Yakataga. Then again, Spriggan is actually pretty unforgiving, and one of these games was released on everything and the other remained a Japan exclusive PC Engine game for nearly 30 years. Thankfully, it was re-released for the PC Engine and TurboGrafx mini consoles in 2020. However, interestingly, the copyright for the game itself was attributed to Konami, who released the console as they now own Hudson Soft and thus the rights to the PC Engine brand. But Naxatsoft's parent company Kaga still exists. So how did Konami get a hold of the rights to one of their games? I genuinely don't know. I believe maybe the developer Compile owned the rights to the game, and when they folded in 2002, the rights went to Hudson Soft, and a similar situation exists with their games Alien Crush and Devil's Crush, which they also developed for Naxat Soft, both of which had all of their re-releases handled by Hudson Soft and later Konami. The weird thing is, Spriion was originally meant to be a game in Compile's Alesta series. Maybe Naxat owned the name, but Compile owned the game. And if Compile did give the rights of the games they developed for Naxat to Hudson, why? Anyways, Spriion has 2 sequels, both of which are horizontal shooters. Another one developed by Compile for the PC Engine CD, and one developed by the infamous Chaos, aka Micronics, for the Super Famicom. And they are massive steps down from the brilliance of the original. But neither of these games are Summer Carnival games. Instead, on July 17, 1992, Naxat followed Spriion up with 2 games created for the Summer Carnival 92 event, both of which share similar design elements. One of these games ended up being the most popular out of the entire Summer Carnival series, Rekka, developed by Kid and released for the Famicom. Rekka is notable for how insanely technically impressive it is for the hardware, being insanely expensive, and for being insanely hard. Yeah, it's not really the type of game I would recommend to most people. This is as niche gets when it comes to these types of games. I think Compile's Gun Knack is the much better technically impressive STG for the Famicom, but that's not to take anything away from Rekka. It certainly has its fans and is definitely the most technically impressive officially licensed game for the hardware. However, the other one of these 2 games, which has been greatly overshadowed by Rekka, was released for the PC Engine CD, going under the name of What Your Mother Be Alzadik. It's basically the complete opposite of Rekka. It's not particularly impressive, and it's lacking in terms of content. Like, really lacking. You can experience everything this game has to offer in an hour. Like, for a game that was 2,500 yen, it's basically a scam. It is just score attack and time attack modes and 2 very short campaigns. Yeah, it's pretty underwhelming, but I don't know why, I just have a massive soft spot for this game. Both the visual style and mechanics are incredibly basic here, but it's just fun. I actually think the Naxat Summer Carnival games, while not better than Hudson's Caravan games overall, had better score attack and time attack modes. I mean, I'd hope so in a game that basically only consists of that. What I think really elevates this game though is the music. It's incredible. Some of the best music in a PC Engine game. I'd actually recommend checking Alzadik out, mainly because I think a lot of people struggle to get into shoot 'em ups because they're too worried about trying to beat them with as little setback as possible. So a basic score attack short game like this, I think, is actually pretty good for those kinds of people. Is it worth paying a lot of money for? No, but it's worth playing any way you can. But I also see why this game lives in the shadow of the already kind of obscure Rekka, and that's a pretty unfortunate name there. Also, I want to point out the time period these 2 games released in was an insane period for these home console shoot 'em ups. On July 10th, 1992, Hudson's last Caravan shooter, and their best one, Soldier Blade, was released. On July 17th, these 2 games were released, and the game Glade Lancer released for the Mega Drive. And on July 24th, Thunder Force 4 was released for the Mega Drive. Wow. In 1993, Naxat would release their last Caravan game, Nexar Special, which was just a re-release of another game they had released the previous year. It seems these events didn't do that well, likely because of the waning popularity of shoot 'em ups for whatever reason, because that was the last Summer Carnival event. Oh yeah, here's the score I got for Alzadic's beginner mode while I was playing, and here's the score I got for the score attack mode while I was recording. Can you beat them? In 1992, members of numerous companies primarily known for making console and computer games such as Hudson Soft, Naxat Soft, and primarily Compile would found the companies Rising and Aiding in order to create and distribute arcade games respectively. Rising's first ever game would take from the developers' experience creating shoot-'em-ups for home systems, as they would create the fantasy-themed arcade shooter Sorcerer Striker, released in 1993, better known by its Japanese title, Maho Daisen. Huh, that's funny, mine does too. Development was advised by fellow developers of arcade STG's Toaplan, as the game was created using their hardware. Hot take, I think Maho Daisen is Rising's best shooter, though I also like their game Armed Police Batrider. I respect them, I'm just not a big fan of them. They go way too niche for me, and I've made it clear that I usually prefer games that I feel I can recommend to people. Though I would recommend Maho Daisen and Batrider. What's not a hot take is saying that both of these games need to be released on modern platforms. Maho Daisen is a cool game and it spawned two sequels. One from 1994 that's a freaking weird shooter racing game hybrid that I really suck at but really respect, and another from 2000 that was distributed by Capcom. But an interesting thing about Maho Daisen that I never hear anybody bring up is that it had competition, but not really. See, since a lot of the staff from Rising came from Compile, I believe that Compile's 1993 PC Engine CD game Sylphia, which is also a fantasy-themed STG, is a response to Maho Daisen. I mean, it checks out. Maho Daisen was first released to Japanese arcades in May of 1993, and Sylphia was released in October of 1993. It's likely that Compile staff saw early promotional materials for Maho Daisen and were inspired to create Sylphia. Apparently, Sylphia was only halfway complete when it was first revealed in August of 1993, so it really is possible. Game development times, especially for titles as simple as this, were pretty short back then. Is it a coincidence? Maybe. I mean, to be fair, the games don't have much in common other than the fantasy setting aesthetically, but they just look eerily similar even in spite of that. However, if there was an attempted rivalry between these games, Maho Daisen would end up getting two sequels, while Sylphia would end up being Compile's last shoot-'em-up aside from 1996's Rude Breaker and 2001's Xanac Neo. Sylphia now joins the ranks of Magical Chase and Gingafuke Densetsu Sapphire, which I did a pretty extensive review of by the way, as infamously expensive games for the PC Engine, with it usually fetching for hundreds. It hasn't ever seen a re-release either, so you're just gonna have to sail the seven seas looking for it. Afterwards, Compile would shift to focus almost exclusively on their most popular franchise, the puzzle series spin-off of their Maho Monogatari games, which you may have heard of, Puyo Puyo. Kinda like how Devious with an X was the biggest arcade game since Space Invaders, but only in Japan, Puyo Puyo was the biggest arcade game since Street Fighter II, but only in Japan. I actually theorize that Rising was founded because of Puyo Puyo. No one has ever claimed this to be the case, but it actually makes a lot of sense, and I think it was actually the final nail in the coffin to the shoot-'em-up genre's waning popularity and legacy. See, before Puyo Puyo was released to arcades by Sega in 1992, Compile pretty much exclusively made games for computers, consoles, and handhelds. But I think after seeing massive success with Puyo Puyo in arcades, combined with being worried about the company's direction, as it was obviously going to switch from focusing on STGs to focus on Puyo Puyo, a bunch of staff wanted to form their own company to make arcade STGs. and a bunch of people who worked for other consumer system-centric game companies joined them to form Rising. Unfortunately, I think this had the side effect of having these companies lose a lot of their STG developing talent, and with the genre already waning in popularity thanks to increasing focus on the Western market, where shoot-'em-ups were already less popular because a lot of the genre's early formative games didn't become nearly as popular as they did in Japan, likely thanks to the satanic panic leading to a lot of arcades being shut down when they were released, and the rise of platformers, then beat-em-ups, then fighting games, stealing the spotlight away from the genre in arcades and at home. This basically spelled doom for these home-style STGs, so the genre started moving back into arcades at a time when they had begun waning in popularity again after a short burst of life was shot back into them with the fighting game craze, which led to the genre becoming even more niche. It really was the end of an era as Compile stopped making STGs and Hudson and Naxatsoft's Last Caravan shoot-'em-ups released in 1992. I really wonder how these games and series in particular would have evolved if all of these butterfly effects never happened. Would they have eschewed their signature convoluted power-up systems that gave these games a huge level of replay value that made them perfect for the home environment, in favor of including more levels with things like world maps or more alternate modes or objectives? Would the staff that made all of Compile's classics up until 1992 no longer being around to create experiences tailored to the console player during this time, evolving the genre for a new era? I guess we'll never know. To make it clear, I am more of a quality over quantity guy when it comes to this genre, so in some ways I think it's good that we got a lot of tight, short and sweet, arcade-tailored experiences around this time, but still, it's interesting to think about. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Massive thank you to my wonderful patrons. Have a wonderful week and take care. Fun fact, even though I've played them and I enjoyed them, I've never beaten two of the games I bring up in this video. Can you guess what they are? The reason why is just that I think they're a little too long and quite hard. No, not that one.